This is Where Did the Road Go? Our aim is to explore the fringe, to be true skeptics and question openly, to investigate the paranormal, bring light to the dark corners of history, and give a voice to the shunned of science. We deal in mystery and the important questions that these subjects bring to light. What is reality? Who are we? And why are we here? Join us on the web at wheredidtheroadgo.com for a full show archive, links to all our social media, upcoming schedule, and much, much more. Now, join your host Soraya on this week's edition of Where Did the Road Go?
And welcome to this week's show. In a moment, we're going to be talking with Greg Bishop. But first, a couple things I want to mention. One, you can go into, if you're listening to this live on WVBR, you can go into the chat room. You can throw me questions that I'll pass along to Greg. The chat room is, as I said, wheredidtheroadgo.com, and it's on the right-hand side down just a little bit. And also, there have been some people saying they're having trouble downloading the shows. I don't know what's going on. I could replicate the problem, but I can't figure out where it is. So if it keeps up, shoot me a message if you're having problems so I have an idea how many people are actually having problems. Apparently, it is only downloading part of the shows. So we're looking to figure out where that issue is and what we can do to solve it. But I don't think it's that widespread. So that's why if you're having an issue, please drop me a line. Go to the website. You can find addresses. Contact at wheredidtheroadgo.com. There's, of course, the Patreon account. If you want some extra stuff here and there, sign up for a Patreon account. It's only $3 a month, and you get some extra stuff from the show. I have a couple midweeks I'm going to be putting up this week, one with Joshua Cutchin and Tim Banal, and another with the writer of a movie called Alienated that deals with a conspiracy theorist who then sees a UFO and no one believes him. So I'm going to put both of those up this week, and we got some other neat stuff coming up. And but right now, we're going to bring Mr. Greg Bishop in. Hello, Greg.
Hello.
How are you doing?
I'm doing good. I've got some tea next to me. I'm ready to go.
All right. And your new book is called It Defies Language, Essays on UFOs and Other Weirdness.
Yes, that's what it's called, and I couldn't think of the name, and the way I came up with the name is a weird story, too.
Well, tell us the story.
Okay. I couldn't think of a name. And Red Pill was doing the cover, and he said, I need a name so I can put it on the cover and know how it fits. And so it's, I'm going for 2-3 months now with no name. And nothing I like. I think Faulty Radios was one of them, was based on the William Burroughs quote of us about us tuning into the universal message with faulty radios. But so in desperation, I took the introduction to the book and I put it in an online cut-up generator. And of course, what comes out is almost total gibberish, because what it does is take everything you wrote and just jumble it completely randomly.
Right.
The words. Then I started reading the words, and as phrases came up in my mind, I would type them out. So in the course of reading through the whole thing, I just read through it, and I don't know if I was in an altered state or what, but I just read through it, and when a phrase came up, I'd type it. I got about 5 of them, and that was one of the phrases. And I thought it was perfect, because one, I didn't consciously think of using that phrase for the title at all. It just came up from the cut-up. And that's why that's another reason why the quote at the beginning of the book I took from Burroughs, when you cut into the present, the future leaks out. I think I somehow decided, I pulled the name back from the future, and then it became the name. And it's funny, too, because it's a book called It Defies Language. So in addition to the idea that it's the stuff that I talk about in the book is we are limited by the language that we use to talk about it.
Okay. All right. That's actually a really cool story. And you have a little bit of everything in here. A lot of it is UFOs, because that's kind of your focus, but you go everywhere from black-eyed children to conspiracies to just all kinds of weird stuff that's happened to you over the years. Yeah,
for the longest time, I thought, I don't want to write about myself. I'm not the story. I have nothing to do with the story. I don't want to be in the story. But while I was doing UFO Mystic, stuff would happen to me, or I would remember somebody, and I would just write about it in that way. I mean, I can't write about something that happened to me in the third person, or you sound like you sound egotistical.
Right.
But the people I knew, I mean, my interactions with them that's part of that's part of what happens. So a lot of writers I admire, they can speak about themselves in the first person. It's a fine tradition. That's great. It's just that I didn't think I could do it until I just started doing it. Then I noticed that people weren't saying, why are you being so self-centered and all that. They were saying that they enjoyed it and it was a fun story or whatever. And so I got over that fear. So it's almost autobiographical, the whole thing. And there's no what's the word? There's no categories for this on Lulu, the first publisher, and I don't even know if there are on Amazon. So I had to pick biographies or memoirs, which is kind of strange. I don't think of it as a biography or memoir, but I guess the first three chapters, I think, or at least two chapters. Yeah, the first three chapters basically are personal things, and the sort of the last one too, because it has to do with the alien writing guy that I met.
Yeah, which was very interesting. And I mean, that's you're talking about his book and his research, and I don't think anyone else has really had a chance to look at it so much, because that was a very rare book, wasn't it?
It was self-published. We're talking here about Mario Pozzoglini, who was a psychologist. He studied what he said was channeled or witnessed or whatever writing that people said that they'd gotten in trances or channeled or seen on UFOs or whatever you want to call it. But there's a definite component there, and most researchers will tell you, UFO people anyway, that they have instances where people say they've seen or witnessed or had downloaded some way into their consciousness some sort of written language that doesn't seem to make any sense to anybody, except it makes sense to them, and I guess it helps them with their experience. But he made a study of this, and then after he's got a whole history that's really interesting too. But after I'd known him for a year and a half, he told me that he had been doing it himself since he was a kid, which is why he was interested in it. He said that angels were sending him language, and he showed it to his mom, and she just thought he was being, an imaginative child.
Sure.
But, and then he actually channeled out or wrote out what his contact or whatever it was. And this guy was a clinical psychologist dealing with people every day who had a practice and everything. And this part of his life he would not tell, his professional colleagues, obviously. He channeled out the name of my old magazine, Excluded Middle. He wrote it out. It's on the last page of the book. He wrote out the pronunciation and the alien writing letters or whatever, a channeled script, and it's beautiful. I mean, I really love it, but I don't know what to do with it, except that something that was apparently talking to my friend Mario told him that my magazine had a name in their language, and it's been framed on my wall ever since he sent it to me in 96 or 7 or something like that, and then he died in 1999 from I think, what was it? Prostate cancer.
Yeah. Well, and this is actually your fourth book.
Yeah, it is. That's kind of weird. Well, the first one was just edited. I wrote probably a third or a quarter of that book, and the rest is just it's a collection of the magazine. Wake Up Down There.
And this is sort of a collection as well.
Yeah, but the collection from the magazine was all kinds of different writers and artists and things. This is just me, and in fact, I think it's only the second book where the entire content is my own.
And the first one being Project Beta.
Yes.
And but this is a lot of this is articles that appeared where originally?
An online a blog called UFO Mystic or UFO Mystic that Nick Redford and I worked on for years, and then from 19, right, look what I'm thinking. From 2006 to 2010, Nick went a little bit longer because he's full of energy and he never stops. And I stopped in sometime in mid to late 2010. And it was just anything to do with UFOs or related subjects we were allowed to write about by the people that owned the site. So the site finally, finished. They signed up a whole bunch of people, and that went for about a year. And they did most of the work along with Nick. But I found at about 4 years or so, I had run out of things to say, and I wasn't going to just post links to videos all the time or anything like that. I actually said stuff that I really wanted and needed to say at the time, and it all downloaded out of my head onto that site. And then later, Nick and Paul Kimball mainly, and a few other people said, "Where is that stuff? Maybe you should publish it in a book or something." There was some stuff on that site that people are talking about now, and maybe you should bring it up that you actually wrote about this stuff, and then it can be, one, discussed again, and two, I guess give you some kind of credit for, because I don't know if I came up with any original ideas during the course of the thing, really, except for maybe the UFOs as a cosmic art project. But the upshot was that I bought the rights back to all the writing from the present owner, and then just sat there for something like 3 months or 4 months trying to find them all online, mostly at archive.org, because the site wasn't up anymore, and the owner didn't have any, hadn't saved the site anywhere that he knew of, which was kind of scary.
Yeah, really.
Because I never backed any of this stuff up. I was really stupid. So what I did, I'm going to sneeze, sorry. What I did was find all this stuff, download it off of all these different places, reformat it, take out all the references to what was going on then, or, yesterday on UFO Mystic and stuff like that.
Right.
Bring it up to date, check the spelling, check the references. And I tried, I think I did this for every single article. And I don't know, there was something like, how many words? A normal book, if people don't know, like a 250-page book is about 70 to 80,000 words. I found something like, 150,000 words. It came up to all the stuff that I got offline. So that's basically two full, 250, 260-page books.
Yeah.
And, about a quarter of it was useless. It doesn't really matter, stuff that was topical and that I liked at the time. And then some of it, the rest of it ended up in the book, and another 70 pages of it. I think right now, 248 or something like that?
Yeah, something around there.
I found more material, or I took more material and put it in the Kindle edition. So now it's the equivalent of 330 pages or something. And you can do that on a Kindle. I really didn't think about it until I started laying it out. I was like, oh, I can do all this stuff, and it'll be out. Actually, tomorrow is when it's released.
Oh, okay.
Tomorrow, May 1st, with extra stuff and color illustrations where I could, like that alien writing illustration. There's a color illustration of that, so you can see what the color version is like. And a color picture of Jamie Chanderay, and a color picture of the Botticelli painting that I talk about, et cetera, et cetera.
Nice.
So, yeah, it all came from online. Oh, and then I wrote, I think, at least 2 and I think 3 new things for the book. 2 or 3 new essays. And then I found things that were UFO Mystic, things that I'd put online or written, or something I'd written long ago that didn't even go online, that had just been sitting on my hard drive forever, and I thought it'd be interesting. So there's that's in the book, and then in the Kindle edition, there's even more of those kind of things.
What's interesting is in some of these you get to talk about the feedback you got, or the backlash in some cases that you got for writing about some of this stuff. Like SERPO is a great example. When I first heard the SERPO stuff, it was kind of like, oh, it's another. It's one of those things that it would totally make a good sci-fi story, but it doesn't seem to really bear any relevance to reality.
Yeah, well, some of it did make a good sci-fi story. It was part of Close Encounters.
Was it?
Well, the basic idea of the SERPO story was that sometime in the 1960s or 70s, I can't remember the exact date, there was an exchange program where, 12 or so people, humans, astronauts or whatever, went to this planet SERPO somewhere, and then we got some of their people in return for a period of time. And that at some certain, like after 7 years or 8 years or something like that, the aliens went back and we came back. Although I guess the story was like a couple people stayed because they liked it there so much, and one person died there, and there are all kinds of weird little.
And you point out
But it was
that
just such a ridiculous story on the face of it.
yeah, and you point out that even the math doesn't make sense on the face of it either.
Yeah, I should get this straight because a couple shows are saying, "Well, what was wrong with the math?" Do you have the book in front of you? Do you know where it is?
But I don't.
What page is that on?
I don't know what page it's on. I know.
Okay, well, let me look and see. It's like SERPO was a big fat fake is the name of it. Because I want to read the little bit of it. There it is. SERPO was a big fat fake on 29. Okay. Let's see. A quick look at the SERPO site immediately raises questions. And here's a quote from whatever source it was that was sending this information out. The 12, okay, they were 12. The 12 remained until 1978 when they were returned to the same location in Nevada. 7 men and 1 woman returned. 2 died on the aliens' home planet. 4 others decided to remain, according to the returnees. Of the 8 that returned, all have died. The last survivor died in 2002. So I pointed out the math is wrong. How could 8 people return to Earth out of 12 when 2 died on the planet and 4 decided to remain?
Yeah.
And that seems like a really elementary mistake. And if somebody is releasing information secretly from the government to this guy, which is what the story was, Victor Martinez at the time, who had a big UFO list, he still does, online list, mailing list, you'd think it would, they'd take the time to be sort of accurate, especially with something like that. And my contention was, at the time and in the article, was that if the math is wrong, there must be some certain reason why it's wrong. And I think the certain reason why it's wrong is because there were messages being passed back and forth through those narratives that would come out every few weeks. And that was an integral part of the message, was having the math be wrong. The message, I'm not sure what the messages were about. I'm sure it was about either some project that was going on, or the messages itself were a project just to mess with people. Well, not really to mess with people. That's completely wrong. Not to mess with people, but to see who was interested and why. Basically like intelligence flypaper or something. And also, when the messages were passed back and forth, where the information showed up so they could see who knew what, and and what they were talking about and what they were getting out of the messages. Because I think they did actually have something to do with some sort of project. And that when the messages spread and they figured out part of the code or whatever the code was, they could figure out who was interested in that project, what they knew about it, and who was receiving the information. That's what happened in the Benowitz thing. I'm fairly certain. Well, not fairly certain. I'm almost sure that's what happened in the Benowitz episode that's in Project Beta. Also, some of the same people were involved with SERPO, which would indicate to me that some of the same things were going on.
Right. It seems like you get into this stuff and you start looking at it, and it's such a rabbit hole.
Oh, yeah.
Because you don't know. I mean, to someone like you or I, the SERPO thing seems ridiculous. But there were plenty of people who believed in it.
Oh, yeah, they were totally into it. I think even Strieber was into it for a while.
Really?
I'm pretty sure Whitley Strieber was very interested in it for a while. What he said at the time was that it matched up with stories he'd been hearing for a while. Which is fine because, not fine, but makes sense. If you're going to put out some BS story, disinformation has bits of information in it. Even if it's bad information, it's better if it's good information, because then you can hang all the junk on the stuff that makes sense. There's stuff that can be verified. I don't think anything in the SERPO stuff could be verified. Maybe some of it could. I do not know. Some of the mundane things, I don't remember what those were, but It didn't really need to be. I mean, the story was so ridiculous that people who were going to believe it believed it, and people who didn't. And whoever made this stuff up used it for whatever they needed to use it for, and then they stopped after a while. Actually, they stopped, and the interesting part of this is they stopped sending it to Victor Martinez because he said that he was going. Well, he didn't say. He just started. He was an English teacher, so he started correcting the English in them and the grammar and things. And he got a message from his contact or whoever was leaking the information saying, "Do not change this. Don't change the stuff or we'll stop sending it to you." which is another indication that there was something embedded in the language that needed to be there. Otherwise, the code didn't work.
Yeah.
And I think he wasn't able to do that, or he just kept changing it, and so they said, "Oh, forget it," and they started sending it to Bill Ryan, the Project Camelot guy.
Wow. And of course, as you said, Project Beta was an entire book on the whole Benowitz saga, and you met Bill Moore through that.
I met him before that. That's why the book happened.
Oh, okay. All right, right. And you have some stuff on there about Moore and Chandira. You want to get just a little bit into that?
Yeah, a little bit. What specifically about them? I think it's pronounced Chandera, even though it's spelled Shandera.
Well, we'll give people a quick little background on Bill Moore and what he did that upset everybody.
Bill Moore was a UFO researcher. I hate using the word ufologist, but who wrote the first Roswell book in 1978, the Roswell incident. Well, he co-wrote it. He did most of the research along with Stan Friedman and Charles Berlitz, the guy who wrote the Bermuda Triangle and a few other things, and
right, Devil's
founded
Triangle.
the Berlitz method of,
A Devil's Triangle and a book on the Philadelphia experiment.
I think Moore wrote the.
Berlitz did.
Oh, okay. I think he did it based on research from Moore, though.
Ah, okay.
I got that book. I wonder if it did. I guess you're right. See how little I remember. But he'd been looking into this stuff for years. He used to be an English teacher, or I'm sorry, he was a high school English or history teacher. I think he also taught French. But he started writing about weird stuff and being interested in it. He helped, he helped write, and his name's on the cover of the Roswell incident, the first book on the Roswell incident. When he was on a book tour for the Roswell incident, he got a call at a radio station in New Mexico. Oh no, it wasn't in New Mexico. It was in like Wyoming or something. But anyway, that somebody called up and into the station, and he took the call, and the person said, "You're the only person that knows about this, that seems to know what they're talking about with this stuff. We'd like to meet with you." So eventually he met with and started cooperating with some government intelligence people. And while he was on the board of Aerial Phenomena Research Organization, APRO, in Arizona in the late 70s, what happened was they asked him, since he knew all these UFO researchers, to give them reports on what people were doing and what they were thinking. And people think this is because the government wanted to know, what the people knew about UFOs and how to stop it and how to infiltrate and confuse them and all that. And as far as I can tell, it had nothing to do with that. They wanted to know how much they knew about military programs.
Right.
And there was no internet then. So the only way you could get this information was to, read people's mail, tap people's phones, and have somebody in the field there who was talking to these people. So he would. He'd what so-and-so think about so-and-so? Well, this and this and this and this. Oh, okay, that has nothing to... They wouldn't tell him, but they would look at the information and say, does this have anything to do with any programs or not? Because if it did, they'd pay more attention to the person, because they either might be a spy or somebody inadvertently passing information along just by being a plain old UFO researcher.
Right.
Like, we saw this flying at a military base. What is this strange UFO? And then, of course, somebody in China and Russia says, what is this strange UFO? It looks like a UFO to them, but it might be a piece of technology that the United States is testing or has operational or whatever. So this was the reason why they wanted more in the loop. They had apparently been in contact with other people that either said no or they said yes, and they were involved in slightly different ways. So they asked him to start watching this guy, or talking to this guy, Paul Benowitz, who had been looking at things going on at a military base in Albuquerque. And he had seen some strange things flying over the military base, which apparently the military knew what the things were. In fact, they had, when he watched them, he had said that, or I got this from another guy that knew him, he'd see people walking around these strange lights that were landed on the ground, and then the things would take off, fly straight up in the air and fly over this mountain range and dip behind the mountain range. And sometimes apparently do these weird, aerial maneuvers that were kind of not airplane or helicopter-like. These glowing glowing things. Didn't know what they were, but obviously they were under the control of the military. Anyway, so he thought it had something to do with aliens invading the Earth and the United States. So he told the military this, and they said, "Oh, that's very interesting." And they wanted to keep, instead of telling him to stop, they kind of wanted to keep him close so they could find out what he was seeing and who he was talking to.
Mm-hmm.
Because the Russians and Chinese were vitally interested in stuff in the late 70s around military bases.
Yeah,
anyway, the guy was his own worst enemy. He was very susceptible to his own belief system and any suggestions he got. Most of the suggestions I think came from his own mind, as far as I can tell. And this is talking to people that were not military that told me this. He was paranoid and weird before he even talked to the military or intelligence people. But it just got worse, and they didn't care if it got worse. And in some cases, they encouraged some of his things just to get him away from certain programs. Anyway, he eventually ended up in a mental health facility for like a month or two. His family put him there because they were really worried about him. And Bill followed him all through this. And eventually, he kind of dropped out of it because it just, I think it affected his health. It affected his physical health, too. Jamie Chandere was a television producer that Bill Moore knew in the LA area, and they became research partners. And Chandere was privy to a lot of the stuff that was going on with the spy stuff that was going on. As it turned out, apparently he had a history with at least who was it? Was it the CIA? I can't remember, but he had a history as a consultant. Moore told me. I don't know if people want to believe it or not, but his expertise had been used in the past for actually for what's the word for voice analysis and analysis of recordings to see if they had been altered or something. I think he had been used in his testimony had been used in a court-martial trial a long time ago to figure out if somebody had actually said something that they said that was on tape.
Right.
Anyway, Chandere became ingratiated with this a group of people in the government. Him and Moore had this group of contacts in the government that they called the Aviary. They just wanted to call it something, so they just gave them bird names and then called it the Aviary. And these are people in the government who had contact with, not contact with, but they thought they were in a position to find more out about UFOs than the general public. And I suppose they were, but eventually they broke up because they didn't get anything, apparently didn't get anything really much more than the general public did. Somebody in this group, or somebody mailed an envelope to Jamie Chandere in 1982 or 3, something like that, and that became what was called the MJ-12 documents, which have since been mostly disproven.
Right.
Even Moore doesn't believe most of them now. But he and Jamie went talked to a lot of people about a lot of strange things, and there were a lot of cloak and dagger things. One time they had a meeting, and they did it on an island out in the middle of a lake somewhere in the northern Midwest. They didn't tell me exactly where it was, but I mean it got to that kind of level, so that they couldn't be listened to. They just sat at a bench. All these government people sat at a bench and talked about whatever they're going to talk about in the middle of a lake on a little island.
And there's a point here where you say something about how government officials also think that UFO truth is being hidden from them as well.
The people that I know about and have talked to and have heard about, they say that they can't seem to find out what they need to find out. Certainly there are witnesses to strange things that have gone on, sightings and all that. There's even people that say that they've seen aliens and talked to them and all that. I don't know what to think about that. It's kind of hard for me to believe it's kind of hard for me to believe in it as a fact because there's no way to prove it.
Right.
There really isn't. So what I'm left with is that I think that most people that are interested in the subject, that are within the government and whatever associated, private industry that has access to some of this information, that they don't really know a whole hell of a lot about about it than we do. In fact, some of the contacts with UFO researchers might be because they're trying to find out more information about the subject, not keep them from knowing something. It's that John Keel quote. What is it? UFO researchers are not telling the government what they know about UFOs. I think there's some truth to that, and I think the reason is because the subject is so strange that our perception, and this is an idea of mine I've been pushing for a few years, our perception forms a lot of our ideas about it, not what the thing is, but what we think about it.
Yeah.
And that gets in the way. And I think that people in the government, some of them are not aware of this because they're not smart enough or whatever, and they say, well, how can we crack this? And other ones know that it's weirder than we can imagine, and that, what's there to disclose if they don't know what the hell's going on? I think that's the basis of this disclosure thing. It's not going to be revealed because I don't think they know exactly what's going on or how to control it, which is probably more the issue.
Now, Shandera broke contact with you at some point after telling you that he had, seen aliens? Or new aliens were here?
He never saw, he said one time, I was talking to him on the phone. Bill Moore put me in contact with him. I can't even remember why. Maybe we were going to work on something together or whatever. But I would call him about once a month or once every couple months for about a year, maybe a little more than a year. I had a lot of conversations with him. I never recorded them because he didn't want me to. Mm-hmm. But at one point, we talked about all kinds of things. I wish I remembered what we talked about because there was a lot of stuff. And it did not have to do with UFOs some of the time. We were talking about other things, about, Fortean things and about ghosts and about psychology and about, all the things associated with the subject. He's a very intelligent guy. At one point he said that he knew that there were aliens, or at least something non-human, that were visiting or visited this planet. And I said, how do you know that for sure? How can you be so sure? I said, did you meet an alien? He said, no. And finally he went to the old, intelligence thing where if you guess it, I'll tell you, because the part of the oath or whatever he told to somebody made a promise that he wouldn't reveal what he knew. But if you guess it, they haven't revealed it, you've done it, right? So technically, they haven't revealed anything.
Right.
So he told me, yeah, if I guessed it, he'd tell me I was right. And for months, I couldn't guess it. And he never said he wouldn't tell me if I was close or anything like that. He'd just say, nope. Did you meet an alien? Nope. Did you see a film? Nope. Of course that can be faked. Did you see a ship? That could be faked. Nope. There was, and I couldn't think of anything. And after a few months of this, I finally said, look, I think this was 1999. I said, would you be interested in doing an interview for the magazine? At the time, my magazine excluded Middle. And he said, yeah, sure. This was I think before Christmas in December. And he said, I'm going away for the Christmas holiday. When I come back, we'll do the interview. And I didn't hear from him after the Christmas holiday. And after I didn't hear from him or get an email or anything, I called his house. And within something like 3 weeks or a month after I talked to him last, his phone had been, the number had been reassigned.
Huh.
And all I got was a message with a woman saying, I don't know if people are calling for somebody named Jamie Shander or something. He doesn't live here and I don't know who he is. I should have recorded that piece of it. Was just some woman saying that she didn't know what was going on and she didn't know why people were calling with his number. She said, leave a message, but if you're calling for the Jamie Chandray guy, I have no idea who he is or where he's at. And after that, he didn't talk to me, he didn't talk to Bill, he didn't talk to anybody, he disappeared. Apparently he still lived at least, maybe 10 years ago in the Los Angeles area. But nobody's tracked him down since then. Even Bill Moore doesn't know where he is. He didn't get back in touch with him either. And it had nothing to do with, they didn't get in a fight or anything like that. He just disappeared.
That's so weird.
Yeah, well, my idea is probably he might have been into it deeper than Moore was, and they just said, okay, your job's done, stop.
Yeah. Now Moore,
anything you're doing that has anything to do with this, just cut it out, go on with your life, and he did.
Yeah. And Moore upset people by announcing that this is what was going on at a UFO convention.
Yeah, I should have mentioned that. I get, if you see me going astray, please pull me back, because I'll do that really easily. In 1989, about 2 years after I met him, when I was a youngster, he he told me before he had an office in Los Angeles, a block from the office I was working at. I found out, so I just walked down the street one time and met him, and we met that way. Actually, the first time I went there, I think Stan Friedman was actually in his office, or maybe the first or second time. Very soon after, I was like, "What's Stan Friedman doing here?" Because at that point, I knew who Stan Friedman was, and I knew they worked together. Anyway, as I said before, he entered into this agreement with certain people in the government because his end of the deal was he was supposed to get secret documents and information. And there's, you can look up all the strange things that happened to Moore. You can find this online. He got sent to like 5 different airports one time, and then left in a room with a bunch of documents that he wasn't allowed to take pictures of. Just all kinds of weird things. But in return for his cooperation on, basically telling his contacts what people were thinking and what they were doing, he was supposed to get UFO information from the government, and he got tons of it. But none of it really pointed to any answer. None of it pointed to any answer that, specific people that knew specific things, at least that were alive. And the upshot was, and I talked about this years later, that he never really learned. He never really got to the center of the secret and what it amounted to, and what the government actually knew, or some people actually knew. He still doesn't know that. But in 1989, because this went on from 1978 or so up to probably the late 80s, and then it kind of quieted down, and they didn't really use him for anything anymore. Probably the mid 80s, actually. So in 1989, he decided, well, this has been quiet long enough. I'm going to tell everybody what happened, because people were asking questions, and they kind of had hints that this might have been what he was doing, and they were very suspicious. I mean, to the point of hostility. So right before the MUFON convention, 1989 in Vegas, we were in LA, and he said, I'm going to blow the lid off this, and everybody's going to be surprised, and I'm really going to tell them what was going on as much as I can. And I said, well, what are you going to say? He said, I'm not going to tell you. I've told nobody. I said, okay. He said, could you help me at my table selling stuff? And I thought, okay. So I just said, fine, with little knowing. So it was a very contentious convention. In fact, 4 or 5 of the researchers got so mad with the direction the convention was taking, and how people weren't paying attention to the strange secret deals that the United States government had with aliens. They had their own split off convention. Who was it? John Lear, Bill Cooper, a couple other people. I mean, it was very emotionally charged. So he was basically the last speaker, on the bill, and he didn't even submit his paper to the symposium proceedings, which everybody else did. I mean, he was in there, but it just said, I don't even think it said the subject of what he was going to present. And he got up and he told everybody all the stuff that I just said about cooperating with them and Jamie and Paul Benowitz and all that. Mm-hmm. Over the course of an hour and a half, 2 hours, he told everybody that stuff as much as he could. And then instead of taking questions from the audience, he typed up his own questions and answered them, which made people even more pissed off. Because if he realized if he'd asked for questions, he would never get through with his answer. There'd just be too much, pandemonium. And there was, as it was, they had to stop the speech 3 or 4 times to make everybody calm down. It's the best UFO. It's probably the best, not even UFO. It's the best public speaking thing I've ever seen in my life, because of the emotional reaction. I mean, there were people crying, there were people yelling.
Wow!
It was very exciting.
Oh, I'm sure.
I was just standing to the side. Phil Klass was in the front row recording it with a big grin on his face. So anyway, he finished this, ran out of the room, exited the room through the rear door so nobody could bother him. And then I went out to his table and started selling things, and everybody yelled at me.
Well, they had to yell at someone.
About this. He was selling copies of the speech for $25 a pop.
Wow.
So later I asked him, if you'd had this to do over again, would you have done it the same way? And he said, yeah, except I wouldn't have been as arrogant. Mm. because he was sick of people accusing him of things and not knowing what was going on. You did this and that, and that. It's like, what are you talking about? I never said any of that stuff, and I never did any of these things. It was all based on rumors. So he got really fed up with that, and he finally he lost his temper, which is, his temper is a lot shorter than mine for people who don't think they know what's going, or who tell you they think they think they know what's going on with you. That's what he got tired of.
Right.
So, but he said, I would have been more humble and been a little bit more patient with people, but I wouldn't have changed what I did to get to that point. Even though he never really learned anything. And I said, why? Why do you think it's not a total loss? And he said, because it was a great adventure. And it was. He was basically kind of a spy for a while. What people don't realize is Project Beta is basically a spy story with UFO trappings.
Yeah.
It's not really a UFO book. It just happens to be the central theme running through the book. And the story is about all the weird stuff that happens to people that are involved with on a government level, or get close to the government involvement with it, and how that interaction affects people.
Yeah. All right, we're going to take a quick break. We'll be back in a minute or so with Greg Bishop.
Where Did the Road Go can be heard first and usually live on WVBR, Saturday nights at 11 p.m. Eastern. Go to wheredidtheroadgo.com to ask questions of our live guests through the chat room. Where Did the Road Go is then re-aired on Dark Matter Radio and Deprogrammed Radio. You can download all shows for free on the website, and you can subscribe to us on Stitcher, iTunes, YouTube, or Vimeo. Additional content can be found on our video channels. You will also find our upcoming schedule, book reviews, blogs, free book downloads, links, and more. We are also on Facebook and Twitter, and if you want to help support the show, there are links to donate to us. Everything you need can be found at wheredidtheroadgo.com.
And tonight we're talking with Greg Bishop about his new book, It Defies Language. And where can people get the book, Greg?
They can get it from, if you go to itdefieslanguage.com, there are links. There's a link to Lulu, which actually makes me more money, even though it's the exact same price as Amazon. And so, you can get it through Amazon or Lulu. I prefer Lulu. It's just a print on demand that authors use. You can get it there. Also, I've got posters of the cover we had printed up. Red Pill Junkie and I had printed up his idea. They're beautiful. They're like 12 by 18, something like that.
Oh, that's
printed
cool.
nicely. So much for the commercial part of the show.
Well, the cover.
Oh, and you can get signed copies too. I will send you signed copies for basically the same prices. You can get it online, plus postage.
And the cover artwork by Red Pill is absolutely awesome. And he did some of the illustrations inside as well.
He did all of them. Well,
Yeah.
the illustrations.
Right, he did do all of them, yeah.
Illustrations at the beginnings of each chapter. Actually, in the Kindle, there was one that was that we didn't use. It's a drawing of Paul Kimball having a divine vision of Morrissey.
I think he showed me that one. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's like I said, that's coming out tomorrow. So if there are more commercials and then about what you can how you can get the book. Yeah, but the Kindle version has got, like I said, same thing that's in the book, but 70 more pages and another illustration and a whole bunch of as many color illustrations I could get, and some links and things that you can get from Kindle. You can link things in Kindle that you can't do in a print book. So
yeah.
I put some links in too, so people, when they're reading, they can actually go to the sites and see whatever I'm referencing.
Nice. All right. Let's jump around a little here to something else. One of the things you talk about in here, you reference a few different times, is cattle mutilations. And I know I had Chris O'Brien on a two-part a couple of years ago now at this point. And, my end feeling on cattle mutilations is what the hell's going on? I've never seen it to be necessarily UFO related, but what are your thoughts on all this? I know you dealt with someone who was researching it directly.
Yeah, I think I have an entry in the book called "Those Damned Cattle Mutilations."
Yeah.
I was introduced to Gabe Valdez, who was a New Mexico state police officer in the Dulce area in the late 70s and up through part of the 80s. Bill Moore told me about him. They were friends. So since Bill said I was okay, Gabe trusted me, and when I went to do research for the for Project Beta, he brought out a entire file. I think 2 boxes, a box or 2 boxes of like office filing boxes full of his files on Benowitz and that whole thing. And some of it had to do with cattle mutilation stuff too, because he was very involved. Being a police officer or law enforcement for that area, that very rural area, it still is. He was subjected basically to the brunt of what was going on there, because there was a lot of that going on around northwestern New Mexico on that Jicarilla Apache land in the late 70s. And actually it continued partly into the 80s off and on, and then there was another kind of flap of it going on in the early 2000s, when the Bigelow people actually gave him money to do a study on it. So a lot of my opinions were formed by both him, a guy who was on the front lines and saw this stuff all the time, and Chris O'Brien, another person who was on the front lines and saw this all the time. And for Gabe's part, he thought that what was going on, he died a few years ago. He thought that what was going on was basically that some kind of pathogen had gotten into the animal population. It had gotten into the beef population, and wild animals too, like deer and any kind of hoofed animals. I don't think that predators had it, or they didn't know if they had it yet. But the indicators were in all these, beef cattle and deer and moose or whatever the hell, and that it had been an engineered disease, and that it had gotten into the population. It was very bad if this secret ever got out. So, what his thought was, what was happening was that somebody in the government or somebody in a quasi-government agency, a private one, something like that, contracted, were going out and secretly taking samples of these cattle. And because they didn't want people to know what it was doing, they just made it look like a very weird thing, and they lights were flying around. There were UAVs flying around at that point. Nobody called them that. He said he heard one of them. It sounded like a lawnmower with a light on it, flying around in the mist and at night. And they could hear it above them, but they couldn't see it, because when they started looking for it, when he was out in the field, the light turned off and it went away. So his idea was that it had nothing to do with UFOs or aliens, and everything to do with cover-up of some horrible disease. That was his view. Chris, I don't know if I can speak for him, but he has almost the same view. But the thing is that explanation doesn't explain everything.
Yeah.
Because nothing that you have that has to do with any of this strangeness explains everything. It just doesn't. Reports of organs taken out with no incisions, and
there was a bunch of
paranormal things that happen to people afterwards. Somebody lifting up and taking cattle away and dropping them with helicopters does not explain all the weirdness.
Right, and there are
but
cases.
Explains a lot of it.
There were cases like the calf being mutilated when people were 50 feet away from it. Yeah,
well, the thing is that people. Covert ops can do some very strange things without anybody noticing, and I think that was part of it too. And both Gabe and Chris expressed this, that some of it was used for training. Let's see what we can do and have people not catch us, which is a little risky, because if they do catch you, then you're going to have to come up with some explanation of why there was a helicopter lifting a cattle up in the middle of the night and dropping it. Because a lot of times the cattle were dropped from a great height. All their bones would be broken on one side and bruised, which was shown that they were dropped from the air. I don't know if aliens are throwing cattle around, but that sounds more like... And then a lot of them had ligature marks on their legs, like they've been lifted up with a cable or a rope or something. So,
right.
I don't know why aliens are running around with cables and ropes and lifting cattle up. So it probably had more to do with humans and a lot less to do with quote-unquote aliens. But Yeah, so that's basically my idea now is some sort of combination between what Chris and Gabe Valdez told me. In fact, it's probably very close to Chris's explanation for it, which he says that one explanation makes sense for any of it, and I tend to agree with him based on his research and Gabe and the very few people that I've talked to. I haven't really gone out, and done cattle mutilation research.
Right.
I've talked to people who it's happened to. They're pissed off, afraid, and mystified just as much as anybody. More so because it's happening to them.
Right. Paul Kimball wanted to know why you don't write as many books as Nick Redfern.
Yes, I saw that. Because Nick is superhuman, and it's probably a robot from the future sent here to make everybody feel bad for not writing enough books.
Yeah, pretty much.
And this is a joke for Nick. I mean, we're very good friends, and he actually signs books from the book factory. Best Nick to me when he signs books. So.
So let's move on to something else that seems to be mostly human created, but has weirdness to it, and that being crop circles.
Yeah.
So what's your take there?
You know what? It's kind of the same as the mutilation thing. It's like, I think there's a lot of very mundane things going on with it, meaning I think people can make those things a lot quicker and a lot more accurately than you would think that they could.
Right.
I've talked to people that have done it.
Yeah.
And yes, they could tell me anything, but it's been proven that, at least to my satisfaction, that people can do very intricate patterns in crops.
If I'm not mistaken, Andrew Collins had talked to a bunch of these people, and they told him where they put their signatures on them, and so he would be able to look at them and look for that signature that was present to know who did the crop circle. And he came back with 99% of these are fake. They're well, at least human made. I mean, they're real things. They're just made by people.
Yeah, I don't know about 99%. I suppose I tend to agree with that. But it doesn't explain everything, because some of them are, I talked to somebody that actually makes them, Mark Pilkington, and John Lundberg. They were working on Mirage Men, and it turned out they were crop circle makers too. So I asked them how they did it, and how they went about it. They said, "Yep, it's just we draw the thing out, we take measuring, like we take rope and string and measure the things out and put posts in so we know where we're going, and we take a few people out and we're coordinated, and we each have a thing to do, and we do it." The other thing that's been pointed out is some of them aren't done overnight. Some of them take 2 or 3 nights. And if people don't notice them, they got time to finish them.
Right. Yeah.
So maybe some of the really elaborate ones aren't done in a night. However, and this is one of those things, no one explanation makes sense for everything. How do they explain the apparent heat applied to some of the crops and some of the circles? How do they explain the burning of the surface of the wax, the waxy residue that's on some crops like wheat and things like that?
Yeah.
As if some heat has been applied. You can't do that by stomping it down with boards.
Yeah, it almost seems like it was exposed to plasma of some sorts.
Yeah, or microwaves.
Yeah.
Or something like that. So, not to say that aliens do this or whatever. I think, I don't know how people could do it, how humans could do it. There's got to be some way. Well, that doesn't have to be, but it would seem more likely to me that somebody would be testing something to see if they could do it. And I'd be maybe way behind on crop circle research. I am not a crop circle researcher.
Right.
The other weird thing about all this is that, and these guys told me this too, that some of the people that go in and fake the crop circles, weird stuff happens to them while they're doing them.
Yeah.
And I put this in the book too. It's called Crop Circles Hoax or Hex. And my idea was, and their idea that they explained to me, is that maybe we're doing some weird kind of ritual that we don't even know about. The act of doing it calls up strange things and stuff, because they've seen orbs flying around and had, felt presences and all that, and they're faking the thing, and weird stuff's happening to them. So
right.
That's another whole aspect of it that nobody ever really talks about, because the people that believe that aliens are here and making the crop circles is some kind of message to us, which I don't discount. I just think it's less likely. Those people absolutely will not listen to anything that a hoaxer will talk about, and that's too bad, because I think they're doing something that makes weird things happen. I'm going to give a talk about this at the East Coast Paraconference, and I'm in the process of talking to all these people and actually getting quotes from them about what kind of weird stuff has happened to them while they're doing this. I don't know if it still goes on. It must, because there's still crop circles.
Oh, yeah, yeah. And where is the East Coast Paraconference? It's
going to be in Liverpool, Nova Scotia, which is about an hour north of Halifax. And that's August, I think, 6th, 7th, and 8th. I think they got a page on Facebook and obviously a web page. Let me make sure here. Let me look on my calendar. Yeah, August 5th, 6th, 7th.
Okay.
2016. So in a few months here.
What I always found weird about the crop circles is when what were the guys' names that came out and said they were making them all? Something and Dave. Was it Bob and Dave?
Doug Bauer and Dave Chorley.
They you had these things appearing all over the UK, and they were just like, oh yeah, we made them all. And you're thinking, these are two old guys. I really don't think they're making them all. I mean, other people may have been making them with them, but they were taking full credit here, and the media never questioned it. They just, yeah, okay, that makes sense. It's like, wait, what just happened?
Yeah, well, the thing is, that's the certainty disease, which I'm always fighting against. There's got to be an answer. That's the answer. Okay, that's the answer. It's like, that doesn't answer like half to three-quarters of the questions about it, but okay, that's fine. I guess you think that's the answer.
My favorite part, though, was they said, well, where'd you get the inspiration? And they said, oh, the saucer nests that used to happen back in Australia, which were essentially crop circles.
Yeah, yeah.
And they don't question, well, where did those come from? It's just like, oh, okay. What?
Yeah, it's just the certainty disease where there has to be some answer. It can't be left up in the air. It can't be undetermined. I've even got an article in there about the practice of Skepticism.
Yes,
which is basically reserving judgment until until you have enough information to make a decision. And in some cases, you have to reserve judgment forever.
Yes.
And you have to be okay with that. And I love reserving judgment on weird stuff. It's just kind of like it keeps my mind open to more things coming in. I don't care if I believe in something or not. I really don't. I'm more interested in, what are the best arguments on either on any side of an issue. Mm-hmm. So that's what keeps me interested. If somebody has an answer and it doesn't answer everything, then it's not an answer. Yep. Even if you want to ignore the stuff that's the good information that negates what your explanation is. It's I think it's something that a lot of people should, if you're looking into weird stuff and UFOs and all this other stuff, ghosts, I don't know what it is, keep your options open. Don't disbelieve and don't believe. It becomes a lot easier to do the longer you do it.
Yes, that's very true. And let's get into a little bit about skepticism, because that term in itself has been hijacked. We've talked about it here on the show many times, where skepticism means having that certainty that none of this is true nowadays, and that's not what skepticism is. Skepticism is basically what you just described, and that's where the word comes from. And what's the term you used?
What you mean from Skepticism?
Yes. I knew I was going to say it wrong, so I had you say it.
Yes, from the term zetetic, I guess. It was a school of philosophy in ancient Greece, which held that nothing is either true or not true, and that you should be able to, basically fence it on something for as long as possible until it becomes glaringly obvious that by concatenation of all the evidence that something has been solved. It's very easy for something like, migratory patterns of whales or something. It's not so easy when you're talking about, where do UFOs come from and what are they? That decision has not been made yet. I don't think none of the sides have come up with a an adequate explanation that takes into account all the data.
Yeah.
And some of the data cannot be thrown out. It's just like, well, that's an outlier, so we can't use that. I don't think you can almost can't throw out anything to do with UFOs except hoaxes and people's beliefs and all that stuff. If you look at it closely for a long time, you realize that no one explanation makes any sense completely. Therefore, you should not make a decision about it. There's many possibilities. I don't exactly know what the answer is, but looking at every possibility, or as many as possible, and seeing the merits of all of them, that it's almost like what's the word? You can meditate on it for years.
Yes.
As long as you don't make a decision about it. It's like, this is it. Because you've noticed this, and probably most people listening have noticed this. As soon as somebody makes a decision about what the thing is, they start to look silly after a while when they're presented with information that doesn't have that negates what they're saying. It doesn't mean they're wrong. It just means they don't have all of the answer.
Right.
And I don't think there is an answer, and the answer doesn't lie with gathering more data and research. I think the answer lies more with this is a good ending point, although I don't want to end, but the answer lies more with people, the way people understand things, the way people see and recognize things, how they perceive things, how those things are processed by the brain and the consciousness and our senses and all that. That kind of stuff has not been looked at, and I think people are looking at that more as an avenue of research. I don't know if it's an answer, but I think it's a really important overlooked thing. Is us in the equation.
It's a piece that we absolutely have to look at. I mean, my feelings on it currently, and they change all the time, are that we don't have the reality model to understand what's going on. And for as long as, when you look at this on the surface, people say, well, either you believe in extraterrestrials or here in spaceships, or it's all bunk. It's like that's where you have that very simplistic either or type of question. And when people say that to me, sometimes I don't even know where to begin.
Yeah, that's just what they want you to think. I think there's some point in our intellectual evolution where we get past that and start looking at things in terms of possibilities and in terms of, like I said, how we figure into the equation.
Yeah.
Because if we're in the equation, it's very hard to tell where the thing's coming from, because we immediately put all of these meanings and everything on it.
Yeah. Oh, exactly. And two, our culture seems to have that either or type of thing. It's always one or the other.
Yes.
And
I think that. Go ahead.
Go on.
I think that's if I was somebody coming from some other consciousness, planet, dimension, whatever you want to call it, if I wanted to hide myself easily in the culture, it'd be very easy, because people they would be looking at something in a way that looks like a realm of possibility, like a range of frequencies, and we're just looking at the thing as being off or on.
Yeah. Look
at all the places you have to hide in that case. You're hiding behind people's just their perceptions. They think you're hiding behind whatever, but it's them that's doing the hiding. It's us that's doing the hiding, not whatever it is that is interacting with us. And I do think there's something that's non-human that interacts with us. I'm pretty sure of that.
Yeah.
It has been for a long time. That's the basis of why we're all interested in this subject.
And one of the things that I wanted to bring up here is you talk a little bit in the book about the name game, which we'll explain to people in a moment. But with the name game, you're looking at, like, in order for this to happen, does there need to be intelligence behind it? Or could something like that come from us? Like, is that even possible?
What, the fact that strange things cluster around names and place names and all that?
Yeah, if you want to give people, well, like the names, I forget which names you were using at the end of the book, but you talk about a bunch of connections between names, but UFOs tend to happen to the same names over and over.
Or, yeah, weird stuff happens to some of the people, it clusters around him. I think Loren Coleman noticed this years ago. He wrote about it. He called it the name game, I believe.
Yes, I think he's the one that coined it. Either him or Keel, one of the two.
Yeah, one of the two. I think they both noticed it. Maybe either they came up with it independently, or Coleman borrowed from Keel, or Keel borrowed from Coleman. I'm not sure. But I think, that's the first time anybody's ever asked me that question, so I have to think about it. And the first thing I think is that the names aren't clustering around, the thing isn't clustering around the names. Maybe people with those names have something in their genetics, I don't know, that makes them better receivers of weird information and experience.
Right. Well, that's certainly possible.
Or, yeah, if you go, because there's place names too, like anything to do with fairies, FAE, like Fayetteville. Where is that? North Carolina? I can't remember. There's people in the South that are yelling at me now. But, Coleman pointed out, and also Keel, like you said, and I think maybe even Jim Brandon in his couple of his books where he wrote about this stuff, that the place names were named that because of the weird stuff that had happened there.
Right, and
places could be strange attractors too, not just people's names.
And both Andrew Collins and David Paulides has pointed out the numerous weird occurrences at places named things like Devil Hill or whatever.
Yes. Yes, people will name something devil something when things are going on that they don't understand, because obviously if you don't understand it, it's the devil.
Hey, we just solved everything. There we go.
Yeah.
So, I mean, but some of the name games are so complicated. And Keel points out a lot of these in his books where, they'll have a Men in Black encounter and the guy might be named Jones, Sergeant Jones, and the person will check later and there's a Lieutenant Jones at the nearby airbase they said they came from, but no Sergeant Jones or whatever, like it'll be similar but different, and it's not the same person, and that person doesn't exist.
Yeah. It's I'm trying to find the chapter in the book. It's just I just called it the name game, and then there was actually another one called More Name Games, which were written like I think 4 or 5 years apart. But I go into this. The one thing I remember without looking is that the bones of Snippy the horse, the first animal mutilation, actually, the first famous one. It's kind of like, Kenneth Arnold wasn't the first UFO sighting, but that's the first famous one.
It's the one that brought it to public attention.
Yeah, so Snippy the horse in Colorado in 1960, late 60s. If Chris O'Brien's listening, he's probably yelling the name out right now, the date out. But I wrote a piece on that, and there's... eventually somebody it went through the bones of the horse went through different collectors' hands, and one of them ended up, the name was Doty, which I thought was funny because Richard Doty is the guy that figures very prominently in the Paul Benowitz case, which most people wouldn't know, but it's significant to me. I think I wrote another piece where what is it, Wetzel or Weitzel is another, and Lauren Coleman pointed this out. There was a case in the mid to late 50s in Riverside, out here near me, about an hour from me, where somebody said they saw something with this weird scarecrowish-like head jump on the hood of his car and scratch at the glass, and then he backed up and it fell down on the ground, and they ran it over, and it was screaming, this goblin type thing. And then like 2 days later, somebody named Wetzel or Weitzel two different people, I think, named Wetzel or Weitzel, saw UFOs in Southern California, like within a few days or a year or something like that. Closely date specific. Right. And then with more significance to me, the first foray of Richard Doty or somebody in the military sending a letter out to UFO researchers trying to get them, like ensnare them into some sort of agreement, like Bill Moore was in, was from a guy named, supposedly, the name signed to the letter was Charles Wetzel. But so there's a history of this, and yeah, you can, like I said, you can read up on it in Coleman's books, and like I said, I have 2 entries on it in my book.
Yes, yeah, and Keel mentions it throughout his books here and there.
Yeah, and that's the other thing. I probably stole that idea both from Keel and Coleman. Like I said, almost no book you ever get is full of original ideas. The rare exception being books by like Keel and Valet and I guess Greg Little and Jim Brandon and a few of those people. The ones that really attract me.
In fact, Valet was at the end of Messengers of Deception, had sort of a name game go on with him.
Yes, I never really realized what that was and why he included it in there. And I think very early on, he was trying to tell us that look at information and the way information is clusters, the way information is used. Look at it as a dimension that can be explored and looked at for connections. And the thing that he said at the end of the book is he was. Do you remember it better? Because I remember.
I do not remember it that well.
Okay, well, apparently he was studying a UFO group or a fringe group called the Order of Melchizedek. He got in a cab in Los Angeles and he asked for a receipt from the cab driver, and the cab driver's name was Melchizedek.
Which was a very, very uncommon name.
Yes, it's a biblical name, I believe.
Because I think he actually looked it up in the phone book, and there were like 2 or something like that.
Yeah. And he just happened to be, writing about this and at the time and got in the cab, and this guy, I think that's another reason why when people are examining, they're researching weird stuff, it often jumps and becomes attached to them.
Yeah.
I think you enter some kind of field or some kind of cluster of information and become ensnared in it, and then the stuff sticks to you for a while.
Yeah, and you end up with tons of synchronicities and other things going on.
Yeah, and I don't know, is that there to confuse you? Is that there to... I think it's there to make you sit up and take notice, and I think the mistake a lot of people make a lot of the time is becoming entranced by that. And not the bigger picture of what's going on with you and the witness and the phenomena at the same time. And I don't know what that might be, but it's significant because it's something that happens to a lot of people that get really involved. Ghost hunters, it happens to them. Stuff follows them home, just like the Disneyland ride. There's a history of paranormal stuff going on in the Haunted Mansion, too, strangely enough.
From the chat room, Phantasma wanted to know, isn't one of the dangers of skepticism the fact that it may prevent you from entering the state of consciousness necessary to grasp the states of reality beyond reason? To be a skeptic, you have to use your mind, and maybe the mind itself is the main barrier.
Yeah, I agree with it. There's a lot of truth to that. We were talking earlier about being in a certain state of mind. I think you have to be in a state of mind where you're one, very grounded in information, in evidence, in data, and all that. But then you also have to be in a state of mind like an artist or musician or magician, where you are open to weird possibilities, and your mind doesn't close off to that. And that's a really rare state of mind to be in. And most of the people that are in that state of mind are, people that aren't really interested in UFOs. They do things like, create beautiful, wonderful electronics that we use, or they come up with great theories about reality and physicists do this a lot. Anyway, it's a very strange balance between a creative and an analytical mind. And I think most people that call themselves skeptics aren't in that state of mind because they discount anything that's spiritual, emotional, anything that isn't quantifiable. They discount it, which is, especially if you're talking about weird stuff like this, it's a big mistake.
And I think someone who has a good balance on that is Mike Cleland.
Yeah.
He looks at both sides of it. He doesn't discount either one, and he just has like that natural balance there in between. Incidentally, he'll be on next week.
Yeah, he's still doing stuff about his new book.
Yeah. And as many times as I had him on, I had him on long before he put the book out, when he was just starting it, but I haven't had him on about specifically the book. So let's see. We got, I think, time for one more bit here. There was an incident you talk about in the book, a personal incident, where you got really paranoid at one point.
Yeah, it lasted about a year.
And what was going on?
At the time, and this is in the book too, about this character, there was a guy who said he was from Naval Intelligence, handing information off to me. And the weird thing was, at the time, I think the Navy was trying to get to people that the Air Force had gotten to or had interested in, because the inter-service rivalry is well documented.
Right.
I think they were trying to do their own, not through me, but in general, do their own information, disinformation, campaign, and I became, through a friend of mine, I became one of the targets of that because I had the magazine at the time, or was a third of the magazine that we were doing at the time. One of the editors. What the guy did was he told me all kinds of weird things and showed me strange documents and pictures from Area 51 and all this. Gave me big, long, I still have them somewhere, these big books of information about what was really going on and how the world was really run and all that. All this information, all aimed at me and a few other people at once. So of course, you feel like, oh, hey, I must be special because somebody's paying attention to you that knows all this weird stuff and is connected to the government and knows secret things. But he also told me things that freaked me out, like people could read stuff off my computers. This is like early internet. So he didn't really say anything about that. He said that people could read stuff off my computer screen from outside if it was on my screen. Weird things were happening, like I was getting mail that was actually opened and destroyed, only from two people, too, Carla Turner and a cattle mutilation person. And it was obviously open. I mean, the thing was that the post office had put it in an envelope saying, oh, sorry, our machines ripped up your envelope. And because it's very easy to open mail and close it without anybody knowing, obviously somebody apparently wanted me to know that they were looking at my mail. That wasn't, that's not a paranoid thing. That actually happened.
Right.
A guy pulled up in front of my house once, and he was sitting there across the street in a white car. I think that's how I remember it. This was in the 90s. I went up to look out the window, and he took a picture and drove away really quickly. Which could have been that could have been a real estate person. Who knows?
Yeah. But if you're in that state of mind.
Yeah, I used to get phone calls. Not really at night. Very strangely, during the day when I was awake, the phone would ring. I'd pick it up, and there'd be either nobody there or there'd be some kind of weird noise. I'd go, "Oh God, that's a mind control noise," and I'd hang the phone up real quick.
Didn't you also say you had some scratching behind some dolls on the wall? Or something?
I have a collection of Kachina dolls. I had all my books. I built a bookcase in the apartment I was in. I had all the books on all the shelves, all my UFO and weird stuff. And in one of the shelves was all full of Kachina dolls. And I would be, since I was on a night shift during the weekend, I only worked 3 days a week. It was wonderful. So the rest of the week, I'd be up all night working on the magazine and digging into all this weird stuff. And at night, like 2 or 3 in the morning, I'd hear the scratchy noise from the Kachina not cabinet, but the shelf.
Uh-huh.
And it was like 4 or 5 feet away from me. And I'd get up and go over there and look, and as soon as I started walking over there, the scratching would stop. And people are saying, well, it was, rats or mice or something. We did not have rats or mice in there. Nothing was chewed. There was no, usually you'll see, rat droppings and stuff around there. I didn't see any of that. And it went on for quite a while. It was just that one shelf. And it sounded like it was coming from one of the dolls. But I'd look over there. I wouldn't see any of them moving or anything. So that went on for a few years.
And didn't you say you took them down and it stopped and you put them back and it started again?
Yeah. That's how I remember it anyway.
And you also had someone walking above the floor above. Yeah,
this is getting into total paranoid, are you insane kind of thing. But I swear this happened to me. Another time I was working, and it was late at night. I was in the house by myself. My wife at the time wasn't there. I just working on the magazine. I walked out of my room and into the back bedroom. It was like kind of a shotgun thing. There was like a big long apartment, and there were 2 bedrooms along, and then the kitchen, and then the front room. But I walked to the back bedroom, and I noticed that my landlord, or whoever was up there, because that's where he lived, walked to the back room the same time I did. That's interesting. I walked back to the front room, and this is 2 in the morning. I walked back to the front room, and he goes, as I'm walking down the hallway, I can hear the person upstairs walking down the hallway the same time I am to the front room. I go to the kitchen. This went on for a few minutes till I'm in this paranoid frenzy. Why is this person walking? I guess it could have been coincidence, but I would stop, I would sit down, I would wait for a while, and I'd listen upstairs. I was like, okay, he sat still. And I'd get up and start walking, and as soon as I start walking, I could hear the floorboards creaking above me. And finally, out of desperation, remembering that this Navy guy said that people could read stuff on my screen, I went in and I typed on the screen in really big font, "I know what you're doing, stop it now." And it stopped. And that made me even more frightened.
Oh, I'm sure.
It relieved me and frightened me at the same time. And I never went and talked to my landlord about it. I was too scared to.
What do you take away from that now?
I don't know. I don't know what to think of it. I've got this weird thing, like, I don't know what it is, but I try not to attach too much emotion to things because I think I don't know what it is. It's not that I guess it clouds my judgment or something, but it's this weird Zen-like thing where I have to try not to attach too much emotion to most things in my life. Yeah, people I care about and all that. Yes, of course I'm emotional. If I see something that I really like, or a piece of music, or I read something, I'll get very emotional. But paranoia and fear, those go away very quickly for me because I think they're useless emotions except for what you take away from it. Not to live in that state. Eventually, I made a conscious decision to stop being paranoid. I was like, God, I can't stand this anymore. It's making me crazy. I'm going to get worse and worse and worse and worse. I could feel myself get edging into craziness, and I didn't like it. So I made this conscious decision to just stop being paranoid, and it took a couple of months for me to get out of it. The weird thing was, after I got out of it, none of this weird stuff happened anymore.
Which makes you wonder, were you somehow creating that into your reality somehow?
I'm sure I was in a lot of ways. But the thing is, it wasn't like, well, you're just crazy. The stuff really was happening. Other people noticed it.
Right, yeah.
It wasn't fake that my mail was opened.
Fair enough. No, I'm not saying it wasn't happening. I'm just saying that maybe our interaction with reality is partially based on what we expect and what we're feeling at any given time.
That's almost without question to me.
Yeah.
To the point where, yes, it's how you look at things. Yeah, it's obviously how things work. But I think, as we were talking about earlier, you start attracting or repelling things to you based on your feeling about them.
Yeah.
And I try to attract interesting, positive learning experiences and people to me, and I try to repel uninteresting, annoying, stupid people or people I don't learn anything from away from me. And that's just how I try to run my life. But that comes after years of having all those things just coming at me constantly and realizing that your attitude plays a huge part in what goes on in your life, and it might even play a part in the quote-unquote reality of it.
Yeah, and I agree completely. All right, the book is It Defies Language, Essays on UFOs and Other Weirdness. You said Lulu is the place you'd prefer people get it?
Yeah, you can get it there because I get a bigger chunk of the sale price. So if you go to itdefieslanguage.com, the Lulu, or Radio Misterioso, my show, there's a link for Lulu there, but there's also, at least on the It Defies Language, is a link to Amazon, or you can just search it on Amazon, as well as the Kindle edition, which comes out tomorrow, May 1st.
All right, and the Radio Misterioso you air usually once a week, right?
Usually, I haven't for a month because I also work on. People know this already. I work the web. I do the web work for Coast to Coast, and then I was a guest on it. So for 3 weeks, I was either working on or a guest on Coast to Coast on Sunday nights, which is when my show is. So tomorrow night, I will actually have a live show, and Red Pill Junkie and my friend Robert will interview me about the book.
Nice.
Which is very self-centered and egotistical, but I'm still trying to sell copies. So that will be on live tomorrow at 8 o'clock Pacific time on May 1st.
All right. Do you have a minute to stick around for our patrons and do the segment we were going to do on Twin Peaks?
Of course.
All right. So that ends the main part of the program. Next week, like I said, I have Mike Cleland on, and we're going to end with some Psyche Corporation. We're going to hear Strange Machine, and she actually just did a new video I posted to the Where Did the Road Go Facebook for Dance For Me. It's nice. It's weird. Go check it out. And I have 2 midweek podcasts coming up this week, as I said, one with a producer of Alienated, writer-producer of Alienated, and one with Tim Banal and Joshua Cutchin. We'll see you then.